heart of our nation's capital. Here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Well, happy Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in and making Washington Watch part of your day. Well, coming up on this edition, the path is narrow, but Republicans in the House are moving forward in what could be historic, keeping the federal government operating, but in a more fiscally responsible way by actually passing the appropriations bills. This is something that's not happened since the 1990s.
I talked to my conference today. I think to get the next 5, we're going to need more time. So we will pass a continuing resolution, bring that rule up hopefully on Friday, that would keep government open, but at the same time deal with the border.
That was House Speaker Kevin McCarthy earlier this morning after House Republicans met. The Speaker made clear the House would not be entertaining the bloated funding bill the Senate is working on, despite the bullying of the Senate scare leader, Chuck Schumer.
This is the problem with MAGA extremism. It's not serious about governing. Chaos is the only word in their playbook. Conflict seems to be their natural state of being, and some of them seem to exult in shutting down the government.
Well, as we speak, the House is in a series of amendment votes on the House floor. We're going to try to get a quick update from Wisconsin Congressman Tom Tiffany. We're also going to be joined by Utah Senator Mike Lee, who's trying to keep his Republican colleagues in the Senate from falling in line with the scare leader. We're going to talk to him in just a moment. And the Biden administration has apparently become concerned about the political fallout of their redefining male and female when it comes to women's sports. It's being reported that the Department of Education is delaying the announcement of changes to Title IX regulations which govern women's sports. Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at FRC, will join me for that and more. Well, speaking of being confused about the difference between men and women, Target, the first retailer to open their bathrooms and dressing rooms to predators parading as transgenders, has, well, to borrow an almost biblical line from Chuck Schumer, released the whirlwind of lawlessness, and they're paying the price. The chain has announced the closure of several stores. We're going to talk about that. And expect the explosive issue of illegal immigration to ignite a showdown on Capitol Hill this week.
Joe Biden opened up America's border to devastating consequences. Has anybody asked the president, what is your plan to do with 8 million people that you've let into this country illegally? Whatever the real number is. You show me what your number is. Estimates are in the millions. And mayors all across America, including Democrat mayors, all across America, are saying enough is enough. This crisis has to end.
That was Majority Leader Steve Scalise earlier today. So 50,000 people have crossed into the U.S. illegally in the last 5 days. What's really behind this lawlessness at the border? What can be done? We're going to talk with Todd Binsman, Senior National Security Fellow for the Center for Immigration Studies and author of Overrun. And speaking of immigration, while the Biden administration allows literally millions to come into the country illegally, his administration is giving the boot to a homeschool family that fled to the U.S. because of persecution. After being in the U.S. for 15 years, the Biden administration gave the Romica family 4 weeks to leave the country. Why? We're going to talk with Uva and Hannah Romica and their attorney, Kevin Bowden, later here on Washington Watch. The website, TonyPerkins.com. Lots of resources there for you. Be sure and check it out. Also, go ahead and write this number down. You're going to need it today. The Capitol Switchboard number, 202-224-3121. Our word for today comes from Romans chapter 3. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have practiced deceit. The poison of asp is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Where there is no fear or reverence for God, there can be no peace for man. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, go to frc.org/Bible, and you can join me each morning at TonyPerkins.com for a short devotional based upon the daily reading. Well, as we were talking at the top of the program, a busy day on Capitol Hill. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy continues to maneuver toward consensus on a federal budget before government funding expires Saturday night. Based on my conversations with leaders and reports this afternoon, the House will be voting on the first of 11 remaining spending bills. Speaker McCarthy plans to bring a stopgap short-term government funding bill to the floor on Friday that will include provisions for spending cuts and border security to buy more time to work through the remaining appropriations bills. Now, it is a fluid and a turbulent process. And frankly, as I've been saying, it's not unlike what we saw in the speaker's race in January. This is a part of the process, no matter how the left frames it. So, look, if we want reform, it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work. And fortunately, we've got some men and women on Capitol Hill working to bring that reform about. And joining me now from the Senate is one of those conservative leaders, Senator Mike Lee of Utah. He's trying to keep his Republican colleagues in line over there to back up conservatives in the House. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Tony. Good to be with you as always.
We may get an update from the House floor here momentarily, so I hate to interrupt you, but we may have to do that. But you and I were talking earlier this morning. This really is a historic moment where we have Republican leaders in the House holding the line, doing something that hasn't been done since the 1990s, actually appropriate the way they're supposed to.
That's what they're moving toward. That's what they want. That's what the American people deserve. One of the problems we've had, one of the reasons why we're $33 trillion in debt is because what I call the law firm of Schumer, McConnell, McCarthy, and Jeffries, in all of its iterations over the last decade or two, every time we approach a spending deadline, they'll wait until the last possible minute to release a comprehensively, secretly negotiated bill, and then drop it on members as a take it or leave it proposition, being told, okay, you can vote against it, and which you may want to do because we haven't given you time to read it, understand it, debate it, discuss it, can discuss it with your constituents or colleagues and amend it. But, if you vote against it and the government shuts down, we will blame you. Right. And it'll be your fault. So a lot of members of Congress in both houses, both political parties, just reflexively give into that kind of bullying and do it. Now, to his credit, Speaker Kevin McCarthy has not pushed one of these omnibus spending bills since he's been Speaker. This is the first trial balloon through his speakership. But these things have happened over and over again. And the deeds, the misdeeds of past Congresses and previous iterations of what I call the firm have trained members into not trusting them with very good reason. So that's why I applaud the members of Congress who have stood up to this and said, we're not going to do it. And we're going to demand that we have spending in government proceed line by line, item by item. When you loop everything together, when everything is tied to everything else, you run a substantial risk that government shutdowns will happen. And that shouldn't be the result, nor should members be forced into supporting perpetual multi-trillion-dollar deficits just because the firm adopts this bullying tactic.
Now, Senator, this practice has been going on for about a quarter of a century. All right, we're seeing this, we'll see a short-term CR that, will be followed by another one, backs lawmakers up until Christmas where they've got to adopt this omnibus bill. Everything's piled into it. And then that we just do this again over and over and over. So to get reform, it's going to be a little painful because we're going to break with how we've done things in the past. So, what I've been telling Americans, just hold on. It's going to be turbulent. Buckle your seatbelts. But this is, if we don't want to crash the plane, we're going to have to fly through the turbulence.
And have to fly right through it. And yeah, it'll be tough at times. And we'll be criticized at times. In fact, the mainstream media so badly wants bloated government spending facilitated by multi-trillion-dollar deficits that they'll ignore those things and hyper-focus on the discomfort of it all. And they always tend to blame only conservatives and looking the other way on what has really contributed to these root causes. But yeah, you're right. We've got to keep flying the plane through the turbulence because the American people deserve nothing less. They've been mistreated for decades, and we've got to correct that wrong.
So, Senator, we've been talking about what the House has to do and what they're in the midst of, but let's talk about the Senate, because you've got the Senate scare leader, Chuck Schumer, pushing forward with a bloated temporary funding bill, business as usual, but you've got Republicans going along with it.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate last night, Tony. At 5 p.m., I received text of a 79-page spending bill a short-term spending bill that would keep the government funded for 47 days between October 1st and November 17th. In that bill, we received the bill, all 79 pages of it, at 5 p.m. We had to vote on it at 5:30 p.m. 79 pages of spending bill text do not read like a fast-page short story. It can take days to digest that because those are full of cross-references that to fully comprehend, you've got to have a staff and a whole bunch of books and people who know what they're doing, which we have, but it still takes days to understand that. They forced a vote on this within 30 minutes of when we saw it. Now, this doesn't contain increased funding or policy to deal with the humanitarian and rule of law crisis unfolding on our southern border. And no, it doesn't contain any of those things. What it instead contains is more than $6 billion of new funding on top of the $113 billion Congress appropriated last year for Ukraine. Only this $6 billion, in addition to it being on top of that $113 billion, this is just for the 47-day period between October 1st and November 17th. This is insulting to the American people. It's insulting to the people who work weeks, if not months, out of every year just to pay their federal taxes, only to be told your contribution to our government is not nearly enough because we're $33 trillion in debt. At a minimum, they deserve to have their own government adequately funded to perform the basic functions that only the United States government can perform for Americans.
Right.
Long before we ship it all over to Ukraine.
Well, like security. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit later about how so many retailers, grocery stores are shutting down because of crime, because we're not enforcing the law. And people can't go to the grocery store. People can't live near the southern border because we're being invaded. Seems like that's where some of that money should go. I wonder, but before we move on, though, the timing of that, bringing us up right before Thanksgiving. This is classic. They want to put this before the Congress again, right before Thanksgiving, when everybody wants to get out of town, force another either omnibus bloated or another 15-day, 20-day CR that puts us up to Christmas. They do this every time.
Every time, Tony, this is the oldest trick in the book. Let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. Should this become law, which it shouldn't, but if it did become law, we would get right up to that November deadline, and just as sure as I'm confident that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow, we will face another continuing resolution, another short-term stopgap measure that will take us right up to the edge of Christmas.
Yep.
December 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, somewhere in there. And then Congress will be convened in December, a few days before Christmas. We'll get another bill on short notice and told either vote for the whole thing without amendment, without time to read it and discuss it and make it better, or the government's going to shut down. And not only will you be blamed for a shutdown at Christmas, but you won't even be able to go home and spend time with your family over the holidays.
Yes, you will be the Scrooge. Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the same. I've seen this play out over and over. And thankfully, Senator, there are some that are finally standing up to it. Senator Mike Lee, always great to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us this afternoon.
Thank you, Tony.
All right, folks, after the break, the Biden administration continues to delay releasing new Title IX rules. That's the rules in the Department of Education that govern women's sports. Why? What's behind it? Could they realize this is a losing proposition? Meg Kilgannon joins me next to talk about it. Don't go away. A lot more Washington Watch straight ahead.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there's the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday. The website, TonyPerkins.com. The Capitol switchboard number, make sure you've got that as well. Where'd I put it? 202-224-3121. I don't need to look at it. 202-224-3121. You're going to need it. All right, the Biden administration dragging its feet on its planned rewrite of Title IX rules to include gender identity and opening the door for biological males to compete in girls' and women's sports with access to other private spaces by federal mandate. Now, the Department of Education pushed back the release date from May to October, but now it appears they're pushing it back even further. Is the White House delaying this announcement, trying to run out the clock on the rules being implemented so that it doesn't happen until after the election? Joining me now in studio to discuss this and much more, Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council. She served in the Department of Education during the Trump administration. Meg, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
Has this become a political hot potato for them?
I think to some degree it has, but, you know, their base really, really wants this, or they think they do.
But
right?
the base isn't happy the way it's written because it doesn't give them everything.
Right. And so, but the LGBT, industrial complex here in Washington, D.C., with all the interest groups and things, they're really, they make a lot of demands of this administration, and their demands are met usually, right? So I think one reason they might be delaying it, though, is so the way that it is a fundamental transformation of Title IX, right?
Yeah, it's taking words that the Congress passed and redefining them.
And changing their meaning, right? To mean the opposite.
By them unilaterally.
Right. And so in doing that, the sports section, we wrote our comments and everything, and we realized this, but the way this is actually going to play out in a school, if a school wants to have a girls-only soccer team and they're in the 8th grade, they're going to have to apply to the Department of Education.
They have to justify
for permission to have a girls-only soccer team.
Who's going to go through all those hoops?
So this is the thing. I think that it's going to make some of their base actually mad when they actually see what's going to happen with this rule. And so by delaying it, The effects of the rule will be felt sort of after early voting has started in 2024, right? The impact of it on the schools won't be fully felt by the time they have to go.
But the schools that want to do it are going to fall in line anyway. They're going to do it already.
They're already doing it, right? They're already doing it. So the places that are going to have to comply and that they're going to target for compliance, that I think that might be part of the reason they're delaying. But also, we had a historic number of comments, over 240,000 comments.
But that's the way the left does things. You have to opt out.
Right.
As opposed to opting in, you have to opt out. And that's actually an issue over in Maryland, where parents want to be able to opt their kids out of sexual material, sex education, LGBTQ indoctrination. And even though that was the policy,
right,
they're refusing to allow the parents to pull their kids out. So they went to court. That's now been fast-tracked. Tell us about that.
So the Fourth Circuit has this on an expedited hearing schedule, and the Beckett Group, that's the lawyer for these parents in Montgomery County.
Montgomery County.
Montgomery County, Maryland. They're really excited about this. The judge in the original ruling spent 60 or more pages talking about how this did not impact the religious freedom of parents.
Right.
And so we think she does protest too much.
Well, it was a Biden appointee.
Yeah, so we're very excited and think that the court may be sympathetic to these parents on this. So this is material that is a part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of immersive curriculum option.
Indoctrination.
So, okay, indoctrination, fair enough. So in math class, for example, you might have a day where you decide to read a story and it's going to be about some, one woman last night I was with Montgomery County Moms for Liberty, and one of the moms described a book that her daughter had brought home, and it was called My Maddie. And her daughter was in third grade, and she brought it home because her sister's name was Maddie. But this book is about a mother who's becoming a daddy, or a daddy who's becoming a mother. I forget which way it was going. But they talked about kissing my Maddie's cheek, and now it has whiskers. And it's a book about a parent who's transgender.
I did that to my grandmother one time.
No comment.
Okay. All right. Let's move
But
on.
that's the kind of thing. This kind of book that's going to be read during math class, and the parents want to opt out of this, right?
Yeah.
It's a lesson on
And they
sex.
should be. I mean, look, let's go back. Kids belong to the parents.
Yes.
Now, the left does not think so. We've talked about that actually last week and how they think parents are stupid. They don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
God gave children to parents. He gave them both the authority and the responsibility to educate them. As we've talked about, they can delegate the authority, but not the responsibility. Yep. God will hold them accountable. All right, very quickly, before we run out of time, Meg, Target closing 9 stores, and they're in New York. Some of them are in San Francisco, other places of high crime.
Right.
We're seeing this across the country, over $100 billion shoplifting spree, lawlessness.
Right.
And Target was one of the first to promote this idea of, hey, do whatever you want. If you're a predator and you act like you're transgender, you can use whatever dressing room you want.
Right, right. Well, the situation with the way they've redefined crime now, and you can shoplift up to $950 and not be prosecuted. I mean, how is anybody supposed to stay in business with that kind of a thing going on?
This is great theoretically, when you're trying to appease the lawless.
Right.
But when it actually comes and starts biting into your bottom line, Target, they experienced over $1 billion in theft last year.
Wow.
I mean, $1.2 billion. Wow. And now they're having to close stores because they cannot sustain it.
I think that it's really a shame in a way, because I'm sure that the stores they're closing are in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of shopping options.
They absolutely are.
Target has a grocery store, part of it. Maybe they're going to be losing out on the opportunity to buy food.
That's happening in Chicago. Chicago grocery stores going out because of theft. The mayor wants to create government-run grocery stores. I guess commissaries. I don't know. Comrade. All right. Meg, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
All right, folks. Don't go away. On the other side of the break, we're going to be joined by a family, homeschool family, that has been in the United States for 15 years. But now the Biden administration says they have to leave. We're going to talk to them. The Romica family joins me next. Don't go away.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
This is Washington Watch. I'm your host, Tony Perkins. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday. Again, a lot of activity here in our nation's capital. And as I said, immigration is going to be a focus this week as Republicans kind of carve a path forward. But even as literally millions of illegal immigrants have poured across our southern border during the Biden administration is targeting a family of Christian homeschool refugees that have been in this country for 15 years. 15 years ago, Uva and Hannah Romica fled their native Germany with their children for the United States. Now, they sought asylum after German authorities fined them for homeschooling their children because the Romica family wanted to keep their children away from the anti-Christian indoctrination in the German schools. Initially, they were granted asylum, and the family then saw that verdict overturned in 2012. The Obama administration then placed the family in deferred action status, leaving them in legal limbo for 10 years, until earlier this month, when U.S. Customs and Immigration notified the Romicas that they had 4 weeks to leave the country. Joining me now to discuss this is Uva and Hannah Romica and their family attorney, Kevin Bowden, who is the director of HSLDA International. Kevin, welcome to Washington Watch. Uva, Hannah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Before we get too deep into the current legal situation, tell us about your initial decision to seek asylum here in the United States.
Yes, we came here in 2008 because in Germany we were persecuted with high fines and threatened with jail time and loss of custody of our children. The police took our children to school, and it was just not any bearable situation for us to stay there. And then we came here to seek freedom, to apply for asylum with the help of HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And as you said, we were first granted asylum in 2010.
So what have you been doing for the last 15 years?
Well, we were able to settle here and get involved in the community and church. I'm working as a a piano accompanist at a local Christian university, and as a church pianist, and I have a private piano studio. And my oldest children who finished school, they have their jobs, and my oldest son is a pilot and an airplane mechanic. So we are all basically living our lives as everyone else around us, living a normal life. We feel like being American now, and now we are forced to leave the country.
You're living productive, law-abiding lives, adding to the American family.
That's what we always try and strive to do, and yeah.
Kevin, I want to go to you for a moment to get kind of the status here on the legal. It was interesting. About a year ago, I had lunch with an official, I'm not going to name him, from Germany, who's here in this country with their government. And I brought this case up, not by name, but the homeschool and how they persecute homeschoolers. And the reaction was very telling, that there is no space for families who want to homeschool in Germany. So the record is established quite clear that for the Romaikas to go back, it's going to be very difficult. So how did this unfold? How come we're 4 weeks and they have to get out of the country?
Well, the reality, we don't know exactly why or how it unfolded. What we do know is that they came in for their routine ICE check, which has been fairly normal for them over the last 10 years. And instead of being told to come back for another routine check, they were told to come back in for a week and bring your passports and to look to start the process of self-deportation. So where this came from, why it's coming now, we simply don't know. But, as you talked to, this is a family that essentially faced religious persecution in Germany for homeschooling, came here to a country where, refugees from those who are seeking religious expression and the ability to worship, has been the history and foundation of this country. And so why or when, we don't know, but here we are doing what we can to help them as best we can.
So how do you see this unfolding? I mean, are the Romaikas going to be forced to leave the country? I mean, are they literally going to come pick them up and take them out?
They could. ICE could take them into custody, and they could effectually involuntarily force their removal from the country. And the idea of self-deportation, and maybe it appears from ICE's standpoint that they want them to just leave voluntarily. But as you've heard Uwe talk to you just now, this is their home. This is their life. This is what their kids know, and here we are.
Uwe, how can our viewers and listeners be helpful?
Well, first of all, we thank everyone who is praying for our family. For God to intervene. And also HSLDA put up a website with a link to a petition where you can help us with a petition to President Biden. You can see the link on the screen, hslda.org/Romeike. That's ROMEAEIKE.
All right. We will certainly be praying. And there's also a bill in Congress. We've been in contact with Congresswoman Harshbarger, who is also working on your behalf. And so we're going to see if we can't get more members of Congress engaged in this. Uwe, Hannah, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And folks, this is where you need the Capitol switchboard number, 202-224-3121. HR 5423. HR 5423. House Resolution 5423 is by their Congresswoman, who is also advocating on their behalf. You can do that in addition to signing the petition with HSLDA. And you can find that again if you didn't catch that. Go to TonyPerkins.com. All right, when we come back, we're going to turn south to the border. That's next. Don't go away.
The world is hurting, streets are filled with crime, families are broken, sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible devotion.
FRC, celebrating 40 years with Dr. James Dobson.
And I just want to congratulate you on everything that's said and done there. I believe in the Family Research Council and the work that it's doing. There aren't very many left that are that true blue, that conform with biblical truth. But this organization has done that, and I congratulate you for it.
That, of course, was Dr. James Dobson, who was critical, instrumental in founding the Family Research Council 40 years ago this year. And in fact, he's the one that brought me on 20 years ago, and it's been a pleasure to work with him over the years. And by the way, we are celebrating 40 years, and we'd love to have your partnership at the Family Research Council. Over the years, literally tens of thousands of families have joined with us as we have defended and advanced faith, family, and freedom here in our nation's capital. If you'd like to be a part of that, go to tonyperkins.com. All right, let me again give you that House Resolution 5423 for the Romica family, and that is Congresswoman Harshbarger has that measure, and so you can call your congressman, congresswoman, and ask them to support H.R. 5423 to protect this homeschool family that the Biden administration wants to kick out. Of course, this is while literally millions are coming across the southern border illegally. You know, migrant encounters at the southern border soared past the 200,000 mark once again last month, adding to the nearly, we think, 4 million migrants that have crossed illegally into the United States since President Biden took office in 2021, with nearly half of those listed as gotaways who slipped into the country without being caught. But this is not evidence of administration that has unwillingly lost control of the border. It looks like it's intentional. The migrants crossing the border are responding to incentives deliberately put in place by the Democratic Party and from the Biden administration. Joining me now to talk about this is Todd Bensman. He's author of the recent book, Overrun, How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Border Crisis in U.S. History. He is a former journalist of 23 years. He currently serves as a senior national security fellow for the Center for Immigration Studies. Todd, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So your new book, Overrun, has been described as the source for anyone seeking to understand the causes and the scale of the southern border illegal immigration crisis. Give us a little backstory. What brought you to this issue? And I mean, you've spent a lot of time on the border. You've seen this up close and personal. You've walked through this. Give us the background here.
I mean, well, you know, I am a recovering journalist and in Texas. So I worked for many, many years on border issues when I was a reporter, covered the Calderon government's war on the cartels. And then after that, I went into the intelligence business with the Texas Department of Public Safety, Intelligence Counterterrorism Division, and continued to work on border issues. And now for the last 5 years, I've worked for the Center for Immigration Studies. So it's just kind of in my blood. I've been on this for a long time.
So let me just ask you a question that a lot of people are looking at this. Is this intentional? And what is the Biden administration, what are the Democrats trying to do?
Yes, it's very purposeful. This is not incompetence. No longer after almost 3 years can anybody mistake this as incompetence. It's their policy, their stated spoken policy to create lawful pathways is the term they use over that border into the country, and to create safe, orderly, and humane lawful pathways over the border. Never anything about blocking, stopping, deterring, ending illegal immigration, just facilitating it. It's really the first time in American history that we've ever had an administration take that position. Even Democratic, stalwarts like, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. I mean, they were all kind of border security guys by comparison. And even some of the people on the far left. I think what happened here is that there was a reaction to Donald Trump. Immigration was his issue, and whatever Trump stood for, we're like way over here to the equal and opposite extreme on the other side, no matter what happens. And I think that's kind of what happened. And ideologues got into the White House in advisory roles who believe in their guts that borders are evil and immoral and are like kind of Jim Crow laws. Our immigration laws are like, Jim Crow, and that they have to be overturned and ignored until then, that sort of thing. And they believe this, and that's exactly what they've implemented.
Todd, isn't this like fostering a soft invasion of the country? I mean, when you look at the volume of people who've come across and those that are known to be on the terrorist list that have been caught and those that obviously that haven't been caught, I mean, there's some people here, they're not just coming to get a job.
Well, I think that a great many of them are coming to get a job. I think that these are economic migrants. Fundamentally, they're economic migrants. That is not to say that the numbers of economic migrants have not debilitated our homeland security screening systems and counterterrorism programs that were in place. They have. This is a historic mass migration crisis by every metric. We have never had anything like this in the American experience. And so our infrastructure for dealing with it has completely collapsed. And terrorists who are on the FBI watch list, suspected terrorists who are on the FBI watch list, have crossed and been caught by their hundreds. And we have had 1.8 million just people get through Border Patrol and into the interior, never even counted. So, you have to wonder who all got through, who are from terror watch listed countries or terrorist countries, or our KSTs themselves got through, along with spies and warlords and everything else. It's truly the ultimate stranger danger, what's going on. We have no idea who's crossing that border, but they're crossing and being allowed in by the millions.
Being allowed in. There's really nothing being done to stop this from happening. I mean, you mentioned
they're all being ushered in. They're being ushered in.
When Donald Trump, you mentioned Donald Trump, I was at the border before he got a handle on it, and then afterwards when they put the policy of stay in Mexico, remain in Mexico, and it was like a ghost town. I mean, it had stopped the flow over, and now it's reached these historic levels. So as you said, it can't be incompetence; it has to be intentional. What is this? What is this doing for? I mean, you work there in law enforcement in intelligence area in Texas. What is this doing to the cartels? How is this empowering them?
Well, the cartels normally, like before anything like this happened, their main line of work was drug trafficking. That's their main source of income. It's always been, and human trafficking over the border or smuggling over the border was kind of a we'll tax you guys. You smaller guys can operate, but you got to pay us a little bit. But it was kind of a side hustle, I guess you could say. But with this thing, the cartels have decided that this is really their main source of income because the numbers are vast. The money was maybe $500 million a year to them before this happened, and by the end of the first year of it, 2021, it was $13 billion. 2022 and 2023, I'm sure it's like way in the 20 billions, 30 billions of dollars. The money is stupendous. And what the cartels do with that money is they buy weapons. They buy arms, they buy tanks, they buy shoulder-fired rocket-propelled grenades, they claim more mines, ammunition, everything military grade that they can possibly purchase. And they buy government officials in Mexico and also in the U.S. And that power means, that expanded power means that our ability to control the cartels is diminished. We used to be able to just call the Mexicans and say, hey, they're doing stuff we don't like. We need you to send your military in and shut them down over here. That's not as easy as it was anymore. And it's going to get a lot less easy to, kind of check those cartels when, for example, they decide to demand their brother or uncle from U.S. custody be released. We want a deal. We could tell them no before, but we might not be able to tell them no anymore. And next thing you know, they may be withholding oil exports from Mexico and auto parts and things like that. I think it's very disturbing how the Mexican cartels have just been so empowered and enriched by this thing.
So that's directly linked to the policies of the Biden administration.
Yes. My book, Overrun, traces the mass migration crisis, the current one, we're in a third year now. It's been like years now, to Inauguration Day. It literally started on Inauguration Day. The Trump policies up until that point had kept immigrants from trying, from staying home, and from just hanging out. They would stay away because they knew that their money for smuggling would go to waste. So they just stayed in place under Trump, but they massed up on the border in the weeks and months prior to the transition. And they were there for Inauguration Day when the new policies were implemented, and they rushed in that day and every day since on that day.
So Todd, your book, Overrun, how can folks get a copy of your book?
Overrun's available anywhere books are sold. It's in bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's just anywhere you want to buy your books. And it just came out on audio, too, last month.
Do you see an end in sight?
The only end in sight, the only possible end in sight would be if a Republican it took over the White House, was elected, and brought in an administration that just simply reversed these policies. This is reversible. It's immediately reversible. But the damage that's been done for the last 3 years, I think, is not reversible. I think we will be just simply stuck with these millions and millions of people that were brought in. They're never going to be, I don't think, fully deportable, all of them, no matter how hard we try. So, I mean, whatever damage is done between now and then, I think we're just going to have to live with.
The implications for the country going forward with all of these individuals in the country that are here in the shadows? I mean, how do we deal with that?
Well, I mean, it's a fiscal burden. I mean, you can see, the case of New York City is the most obvious kind of squeaky wheel thing, where you've got, 150,000 unexpected, needy families and people that need to be fed and sheltered and housed, and nobody budgeted for this because they didn't expect it, right? That is being replicated at cities throughout America. It's not just 3 or 4 cities. It's every city in town.
But Todd, that's a really good point. We're almost out of time here. But had that not happened, I think it was a brilliant move by some of these governors to start busing folks to these sanctuary cities. Had that not happened, the media would have been content basically not to report this or just say, this is Texas whining or this is Arizona whining. But now the whole country sees the magnitude of this problem.
Well, I have a different take on the busing, the governor's busing, just real quickly. All of the immigrants that were put on buses weren't actually put on buses. They voluntarily got on those buses. They were going to go one way or another. I don't think what the governor did or didn't do has anything to do with it. They were all going there anyway. It was inevitable that all the space would fill up and there would be an unfunded, massive, multi-billion dollar unfunded burden in these cities, just like there is in lots of cities whose mayors are suffering in silence.
Yeah.
There is no city in America that doesn't have these problems right now. They all do.
Right. But I think it was the governors brought attention to it with that, whether it's political theater or whatever. It did bring the media, because the media hadn't wanted to report on it.
You're right. But eventually they would have had to report on it, because what do you do with everybody? I mean, they're sleeping in the streets.
Yeah. Todd Bensman, thank you so much for joining us. Great book, and we're going to encourage people to pick it up so they have a better understanding of what's happening at our southern border and why. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, and it is an interesting read. Again, this is not accidental. It's intentional. And while they may have different motives, the outcome here, as Todd was pointing out, there are going to be years in trying to clean this up. But we've got to stop. We've got to turn the spigot off. And this will be an election issue. It needs to be an election issue. And so this is another example, just one of many, of how elections matter. We need to pray, we need to vote, and we need to stand. All right, we're out of time for today, but I want to thank you for joining us. And until next time, let me leave you once again with the encouraging words of the Apostle Paul found in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything you can do, when you've prayed, when you've prepared, and when you have taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.